Hi, my name's Paul from InFlight. We're a company that provides digital services to the music industry. At Digital Derry, I was asked here to talk about how to sell into Europe. So we're going to be talking about how we've managed to set up remote teams working across 3 locations, give some practical tips and advice on how to build networks in different regions, give some advice as to why being in Northern Ireland is not necessarily a barrier to entry to doing business in these different marketplaces. So my first thoughts were, how am I going to fill 15 minutes talking about selling into a single region of a global marketplace? You know, we're talking about the internet here. There's absolutely no borders whatsoever. But when I thought about it a bit more, the reality is that I've never really seen location as a barrier to entry in any shape or form. I think that's more to do with my background, though, than anything else. Coming from an industry where if you aren't thinking global, you're just another local act for local people. Prior to setting up my company InFlight, I spent 20 years as a broadcaster, international DJ and electronic record producer. So I was making records in my bedroom in Belfast and sending demos out all around the world, trying to connect with any record label who would listen and hopefully sign me up. I've had various degrees of success over the last few years, but most significantly so was in about 2007, when MySpace was at the peak of its powers. At this point, digital downloads were well established, but piracy was hitting revenues for artists very hard. Sales revenues were plummeting. Record label advances, which are the bit of income that labels would give you before the record went on sale, they practically vanished, and artists were scrambling around looking for new ways to make a living. The most obvious one being live revenue from gigs and touring. So at this point, I bundled up a couple of demos and I sent them off via MySpace to a record label in Detroit. Now, there's 2 things that Detroit is famous for. It's famous for the birthplace of the Model T Ford and also the birthplace of techno music. I was very lucky that these demos ended up being picked up by one of the most revered record labels and DJs and producers from the city, whose records I had actually been buying for about 20 years since I was a teenager at school. So these demos would go on to open a lot of doors for me over the next few years, with record labels all around the world who would come looking for us to make music in Belfast, ship our demos over to them, and then they'd release them all around the world. Then the offers of gigs started coming in, and before I knew it, I was DJing in Detroit, I was touring Australia, I was all over the world playing Russia, Europe, Ibiza, upwards of 30 plus countries over about 6 or 7 years. So why is any of this important? Well, to me it kind of underlines why I looked a bit sideways at the question, do you sell into Europe? Because I suppose I've taken for granted the fact that my music has always been 100% export focused, and I'd built a network over the years that was truly global. So I wasn't making records to get gigs in Ireland, to be honest with you, for 3 reasons. In Ireland, nobody wants to pay you, the market's tiny, and we haven't quite got beach parties down to a T as yet. So InFlight is 100% export. We don't do any business on the island of Ireland for many of those same reasons. So just to give you a bit of background on what we do as a company, one of the perks of being a DJ is that record labels will send you lots of free music before anybody else gets their hands on it. They do this in return for feedback and support, whether that's playing it on the radio, writing about it in magazines, or playing it in clubs. When I first started DJing on the radio, they used to send me hundreds of pounds worth of vinyl and CDs in the post every week, and there'd be a piece of paper inside the record that I would fill in and send back to them. It was called a reaction sheet, and it would be basically I would tell them whether I liked the record, whether I was going to support it, play it on my show or whatever. Typically these records would have a sticker on them that said for promotional use only, not for resale, but it didn't stop everyone bringing them down the record and tape exchange and flogging them every Friday for a few quid. But about 7 or 8 years ago, this whole process, when digital MP3s came along, the process moved online, and a number of platforms sprung up that replaced the art of physical music promotion. And they digitized the whole process by sending MP3s out to music industry tastemakers. The deal with this was that you could get the files whenever you've left feedback on the particular platform. So it was great for a few years, until every label on the planet was sending out promos this way, and DJs' email inboxes were overflowing with new content. Not only this, but a lot of labels were sharing email lists, so very quickly I started receiving loads of music that was completely irrelevant for my taste or for my show. So what was once a valuable perk of the industry became somewhat of a chore, and I spent most of my time trying to filter out all the good stuff. On an average week, I'd receive up to 500 emails a week, and I'd spend nearly 8 hours a week sitting in my studio, and at most I'd be lucky to listen to about 20% of the new music that I was sent, which is very frustrating. So I created InFlight. When I created it, I wanted to build a platform that solved the issue of content saturation, but also allows record labels to deliver promos in a way that nobody else is doing, with a better solution than anybody else in the market. So we're the first platform for promo distribution that takes promo delivery out of the inbox and puts it into tastemakers' pockets. Our platform allows record labels to send brand new releases direct to the mobile devices of music industry tastemakers, and it gives them vital pre-release data to capture feedback, to capture analytics from their users while they're on the move. So no longer do I have to sit at my desktop for 8 hours a week doing this. I can do it wherever I want on the move. There's a bunch of other cool stuff we do, but that's probably for another day. So as we said earlier, we launched in October. We're delivering promos for nearly 500 independent record labels to around 10,000 music industry tastemakers, DJs, publicists, and media in 110 different countries. Recently, service content went top 5 in the UK, top 40, and we're also working exclusively with the company who looks after all of Madonna's publicity in LA. So back to Europe. Location, my plan for the company was always to build a remote team of music industry specialists in different territories around the world. We want to create the impression of a global company, but with a local touch. You can do a lot from Belfast, but you can even do a lot more if you've got a man on the ground or a woman on the ground in a market that you want to enter. The most obvious cities for InFlight to start off doing business on are the biggest global music cities, so New York, LA, London, Tokyo, Berlin. We settled on Berlin as our starting point for a couple of main reasons. Our main competitor is based there. It's where a lot of the biggest electronic labels are based, and also there's quite a large talent pool of music industry freelancers based in the city. So the type of job profile we were offering was probably going to sit very well in this city. So how do we go about finding the right person? We actually kind of landed on our feet. No sooner had we raised investment when we were looking for somebody that we were approached by a very well-recognised Berlin DJ and producer who was seeking to build up his portfolio of revenue streams to help plug the financial gaps in between his touring schedule. He'd been using our product for 6 months. He'd lived in the city for 6 years, already spoke German, and had a network of industry contacts that was perfectly aligned with our vision of the customers that we wanted to target for the business, which are marquee clients who would help establish credibility in the marketplace, drive referrals from smaller labels, and ultimately help market our brand in the region. So I'd actually been playing this guy's music on my radio show for about 10 years, but bar DJing in Berlin, we'd only ever briefly met. So we offered this guy, Brendan, a freelance contract. He was our first hire. We brought him in on a set number of hours, but basically as flexible as possible. You know, he's DJing, he's producing, but he's also doing in-flight stuff, because it's not really a 9-to-5 job. Once you set your software out there, your product out there in the wild, you know, it's a 24-hour day job. So, you know, for what we do, it's very much a give and take scenario. We're not sitting there going, you're going to be on between 1 and 4. You know, we need somebody that's sort of really buying into things. So for me, I mean, the single most important thing as a company we can do in order to compete is be as responsive as possible, to deliver exceptional level of service that's so good our customers won't want to leave us. Our business model is subscription-based, so a typical customer could be with us 3 or 4 years, and given the nature of these type of platforms, it's quite difficult for them to leave. So we need to play our A game pretty much all of the time. So it doesn't matter what time of day or night it is, we'll reply straight away. I mean, we've clients in the west coast of the States, east coast of the States, and you know, we could be answering emails at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning. Whether it's a customer, user, sales, or tech support, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's fine for me to say as the owner of the company, but it's a lot to expect of a freelance contractor to share the same vision. But luckily, our first hire, we really fell on our feet and we found somebody who totally gets it, who we trust to be there, represent the company, and seek opportunities at every angle. Oh, and if he couldn't get any better, he's Irish too, so that kind of helped. So next on the horizon for us is to find somebody like Brendan on the east coast of the States, the west coast, and a few other spots in between. Hiring remotely and on freelance contracts, it really helps, keeps costs down as our revenues grow. It builds an international presence without being fully international, and it gives customers in those marketplaces somebody to have a coffee with if they need to. Since we set up in Berlin, we're now working with 3 of the 4 biggest German labels, as well as dozens of smaller labels who've come on board as a result of these marquee clients. I go over typically a couple of days once a quarter, call on some clients, maybe do some demos, and of course sample a little bit of schnitzel while we're there. But we've built up such strong links in the industry that referrals from Germany alone now represent one of our largest sources of new business. And the one bit of practical advice I would give you if you're coming to Ireland to do business over there is look up the words crack and small talk in German before you do business. So how to build a presence in Europe? It might all sound a bit obvious, but outside of your initial connections, conferences and trade shows are the perfect environments to hawk your wares and build your networks. Being in the music industry, we have a rather fine selection of locations to choose from. I don't want to shed any tears here, but places like Ibiza and Amsterdam, Las Vegas and Cannes is a very difficult decision on which one to choose each year. But figure out for your business where the best conferences and shows for your business are located and hop on a plane and go there. It's good fun, you'll meet new people and you'll eventually do some business. It might not be this year, next year, but possibly the year after that. Pound for pound, you'll probably not find a more cost-effective way of engaging with new clients face-to-face, building a network and having a good time while you're at it. Just to give you an example, over the last 3 years we've attended the International Music Summit in Ibiza. In the first year we went, in-flight was a blueprint, so we were going there. The plan was to connect with a few people and get some early stage feedback, which we did, but it was a struggle to get meetings as nobody really knew who we were. The good conferences you go to will typically have a delegates database that you can log into and you can connect with anyone who's there and you can approach them for meetings, but typically all the big players that you really want to speak to are book solid or they just don't reply to your emails. But year 2 we went back with a beta version about a month before we were onboarding our first test clients. Again, meetings were difficult to lock down, but the market awareness wasn't quite there yet. But year 3, we've just come back from there in May. We're now launched 6 months, and we began sending out meeting requests as early as we could. We're scheduling sort of 30-minute sessions over 3 days. So by the time we landed in Ibiza, we had 30 meetings in the diary, 10 of which came from inbound requests, and a couple of which were people we'd met over the previous 2 years who now wanted to talk as we'd gone live. So some of the meetings were product demos, some are stop and chats where you know you're not going to do business there and then, but you want to sort of cultivate the relationship. And we were meeting with people from South Africa, Australia, USA, Israel, Russia, Japan, all in the one place, all over the course of 3 days. The thing is with these things though, ROI can be very difficult to quantify because we may not sign people up there and then, but you're simply planting a seed. For example, we pitched to some labels in Amsterdam back in October and they've only just signed up now, and that's what, nine months later. When you look at the sort of cost to send people out there, cost about £2,000 to send a team of 3 over to Ibiza for 4 days, which is less than one annual subscription on our service. So it's not going to take much to get a return on our investment from that one. In the early stages of your business, expo-style events where you exhibit can be good for raising awareness, but we've had some great experiences and some very bad ones as well. Just lost my point here, excuse me. So think carefully about who will be there, and that's going to help your company grow revenues because that's ultimately what the bottom line is all about. Paying to simply have a presence at one of these expos, I think it's only ever okay if you've got money to burn or you're actually well known, because having a presence when nobody knows who you are is beyond pointless and you'll just end up being another pretty logo on somebody's homepage. So start off by looking at where your competitors go is my advice, and take it from there. So the final thing I wanted to share with you is just some small team workflow. We work out of Belfast, Berlin and London, and these are just kind of things that we discovered through working remotely that might be of help to you. With a couple of things that have had a really big impact on our productivity. Our biggest challenges, I guess, are sourcing new customers, managing leads and ensuring our technical support is as responsive as possible. When we started out, we were a bit of a mess of spreadsheets, communications coming in from email, Skype, iMessage, Facebook, LinkedIn, all over the place. So very quickly it became difficult to track where the business was coming from, where it was going and what needed to be done. So there are 4 bits of software which, if I can give you, tip you off about today if you're not already aware of, that when we introduced them into the business, really turn things around and help us focus more on the important stuff, and they're pretty much all free as well. First one we introduced was Slack. Their motto is be less busy, which is exactly what it does in the tin. It brings small teams together with real-time messaging and communications, and it works seamlessly across web and mobile. We've ditched Skype for all our internal communications, and email we only really use if we have to. It's an amazing piece of software, and when a lead or a tech support call comes in, Slack sends a whole team a notification and the first one available picks it up, so we can respond to customers and clients very, very quickly. Our next discovery was a piece of software called Nimble, which is a CRM platform. It utilises the power of social media to help you track leads and deals in your pipeline, and it's fully integrated with Gmail, Twitter and LinkedIn, so it makes keeping in touch with your contacts effortless. You add a new contact to the system, it'll tell you who that contact is, what they're doing on social media, and as a business you're getting to know your potential customer before you've even spoken to them. It's also brilliant for working leads together across a team, as each party knows exactly where the deal is at any given time. For tech support, we use Trello. It's project management software that we've used since we started building the platform. It works very well for us. Every tech support query is created using a unique Trello email. It's auto-assigned to a relevant team member, and then any team member can open it, move it into progress or close it when they're done. And we've automated a lot of our lead management processes and tech support using a great tool called Zapier, which again is free for the most part. And this allows us to connect all the different apps we use together and automate tedious tasks. So for example, when a lead comes in via our website, it's automatically stored in Gmail, which creates a contact in Nimble and then sends a push notification out via Slack. So again, this helps us respond to customers as quickly as possible. And data entry really becomes a thing of the past, leaving us to get on with all the important stuff. So I guess the takeaway from today, I hope I may have given you some insight on, is that small teams working remotely can make a big impact regardless of where in the world you are, but you do need to occasionally go out, pop out and meet people. It's not going to happen sitting behind your laptop, unfortunately, but choose where and how you spend your time as wisely as possible, and think whether you really need to spend all that money on office space, pinning yourself down to one location. Thanks for listening. I hope it's been helpful.